All right, get ready to dive deep because today's topic is something universally thought about but understood in wildly different ways. Heaven.
A fascinating choice, and you've sent over some really interesting excerpts from the Wikipedia article on it.
Yeah, it looks like someone's ready to explore realms beyond our own.
And what better place to begin than Wikipedia?
I like that.
It's a roadmap of
hmm
sorts, leading us to all the different ways humans have tried to make sense of the afterlife.
I love that analogy, a roadmap. And speaking of different paths, the article mentions how many cultures see heaven not as some vague thing, but as an actual physical place.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, remember ancient Mesopotamia? They pictured the sky as a massive dome, but not just any dome. This one was made of precious stones, jasper, lapis lazuli. Can you imagine?
It's easy to write that off as a nice fantasy, but it goes deeper than that.
Oh, for sure.
For them, building heaven out of jewels wasn't just about beauty. It reflected how real the divine felt in their lives.
Right, they wanted to emphasize that connection.
Each layer of the dome was home to a different deity, showing how closely connected the physical and the divine were in their worldview.
It's like divine architecture, where even the building materials tell you something about what they believed. But the Mesopotamians weren't the only ones who focused on heaven as a real place. The article also mentions the ancient Hebrews believed it was above us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But they emphasized something different entirely.
Okay, what's that?
Instead of focusing on architectural wonders, they stressed how completely untouchable heaven was to humans.
Interesting.
It was all about highlighting this divine realm full of power and holiness far beyond our reach.
A bit more look but don't touch than those glittering Mesopotamian domes. It makes you think, though, these different interpretations, do they say something deeper about the cultures themselves?
Absolutely.
The Mesopotamians, with all their different gods, saw a structured heaven to match. Meanwhile, the Hebrews, with their single, all-powerful God, focused on its untouchable nature.
That's a great observation. It shows how deeply our views on the afterlife connect to how we see the world around us. Our beliefs, our social structures, what we fear, what we hope for, it all comes out in how we picture what lies beyond.
Okay, so we've got these grand physical interpretations of heaven. But the article also talks about heaven as a reward, a concept that pops up in a lot of belief systems.
Yeah, it's a common thread.
It mentions Abrahamic faiths, Zoroastrianism, even some branches of ancient Judaism were into that, right?
Exactly. And it's a strong motivator for people to act morally.
Oh, yeah, if you want to get into heaven.
It suggests a kind of balance where good actions eventually get rewarded. It speaks to our desire for fairness, for a system that sees and rewards a good life.
Right, it's like the ultimate what goes around comes around, but on a cosmic level. But get this, things get even more interesting when the article brings up the world tree.
The world tree.
Yeah, connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld. Now, that's some seriously epic imagery.
And it's not just a random image either.
You mean it has a deeper meaning?
The world tree, roots in the underworld, trunk in the human world, and branches reaching for heaven, shows up across so many cultures. From Norse mythology to Indian religions, even some Native American traditions. This image crosses time and geography.
Wow. So it's not just about heaven, but about how everything's connected, like a symbol of the entire cosmos, with heaven at its peak. It makes you realize these ancient cultures were wrestling with some seriously big ideas.
That's the beauty of looking into the past. It really is. And the way the idea of heaven has changed alongside our understanding of things is pretty remarkable. Like the article mentioned some interesting modern perspectives for the field of neuroscience.
Yeah, so from ancient myths, we've jumped to mapping the brain. Talk about a giant leap. But I've got to admit, those studies on near-death experiences, they really get to me.
Me too, they're fascinating.
The article mentions those, too. It's amazing how people from totally different walks of life often describe these eerily similar experiences. The peace, the overwhelming love, the light. It's like there's a common thread running through all of them. It makes you wonder if there's more to it than we understand, something beyond just how the brain reacts to trauma.
It's a question that has scientists and philosophers alike scratching their heads.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the article acknowledges how subjective those NDEs are, those common threads you mentioned. That peace, the presence of a really bright light, they line up with how some religions see heaven.
I know, it's wild.
It's like we're seeing ancient beliefs and modern experiences all pointing to the same mysterious something.
It's like those descriptions of heaven, all ethereal, focused on love and light, might actually be based on real human experiences. Now, I know we can't get ahead of ourselves, but it really makes you think.
Definitely. No matter how you interpret NDEs, whether through a spiritual lens or a neurological one, they force us to confront the big mystery of consciousness.
That's a big one.
Is it just our physical brains, or is there something more, something that goes beyond what we currently get?
Gives food for thought a whole new meaning, right?
Yeah.
But going back to the Wikipedia article, there was another section I found super interesting. The origin of the word heaven itself.
Oh, the etymology. Yeah, it's a word with some deep roots.
It's amazing how language can be like a time capsule, holding on to pieces of old beliefs, old ways of seeing the world.
The language is powerful like that.
Exactly. Like, did you know heaven comes from an old English word that basically meant sky? It's like our ancestors looked up at that massive space and felt this connection to something divine, something just out of reach.
And it wasn't just them. The article talks about connections to other Germanic languages too, all pointing to a shared Indo-European root.
So we're talking about connections that go back thousands of years.
We are. The article even suggests a link to the Proto-Indo-European root for stone,
Wait, really?
which, if you remember, brings us right back to those Mesopotamian heavens made of, you guessed it, precious stones. It's a great example of how language can uncover these unexpected connections between cultures and belief systems that seem totally different on the surface.
Okay, now that is just wild. It's like we've traced this idea of heaven from these ancient myths to the very words we're using right now, finding these hidden connections along the way.
Exactly. And that's what I love about these deep dives. We started with something that seemed simple, heaven, and look where we are. Ancient myths, near-death experiences, the origins of language.
It just shows you how something as abstract as the afterlife is so closely tied to the human experience, our need to find meaning, purpose, connection.
Couldn't agree more. And while this Wikipedia article has given us a ton to think about, it also leaves us with some loose ends.
Loose ends, huh? You've definitely got my attention. What kind of mysteries are we talking about?
Well, the article, it covers a lot, but it doesn't really get into the stories from people who say they've actually experienced heaven.
You mean like while they were still alive?
Exactly.
Oh, like those stories where someone's, I don't know, dies on the operating table, sees a tunnel of light, maybe even talks to someone they knew who's passed on, then somehow they come back. You know, I'm always up for a good mystery, especially when it touches on these big existential questions.
Right, and from a more analytical perspective, I find those accounts really interesting from a cultural and psychological standpoint.
Really?
They often describe things like encountering relatives who've died, intense feelings of peace and happiness, even visions of, like, a divine figure or an incredibly bright light.
It's like those NDEs we were talking about, but with, I don't know, a bit of out-of-body travel thrown in. They've supposedly gone right to the edge and back, giving us a peek, even if it's subjective, at what might be out there.
Exactly. And while the scientific community tends to be pretty skeptical, it's hard to ignore the impact these experiences have on people who report them.
No, for sure.
It raises really interesting questions about, like, what is consciousness, how powerful is belief, and just how much do we really understand?
It makes you wonder, though, if heaven is this realm beyond what humans can comprehend, like many people believe, can we even describe it with words? Would any attempt be like, I don't know, trying to fit the entire ocean into a teacup?
That's a deep question, and there's no easy answer. Maybe the true nature of heaven, if it exists, is simply beyond human language. Maybe the experience is so different from anything we know here that our words just can't do it justice.
Whoa, you're saying we might be asking all the wrong questions.
Right.
Trying to understand something as profound as heaven using the wrong tool.
It's always a good idea to examine our assumptions, especially with these concepts that we can't really prove or disprove. And who knows, maybe those unanswered questions, the things we can't quite wrap our heads around, that's part of what makes exploring this whole topic so fascinating.
Yeah, I like that, embracing the unknown. And that's what's been so cool about this deep dive. It wasn't just about going over a Wikipedia article. We went beyond the basic facts and really grappled with those big questions, the mysteries that people have been thinking about for centuries.
That's right. From ancient Mesopotamian sky domes to modern neuroscience, from the symbolism of the world tree to the roots of the word heaven itself. And through it all, we've seen just how deeply our ideas about the afterlife connect to our understanding of the world, our beliefs, and the things we long for most deeply.
It's like we've taken a journey through the history of human thought, from ancient times right up to today. And as we wrap up, I'm filled with the sense of awe. I've got more questions now than when we started, which is really saying something. And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep going with this. Dig into those unanswered questions, those little hints and whispers. What do you think those people who claim to have seen heaven actually experienced? Maybe something beyond words, something we can only start to imagine. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.